You are listening to the Strong is a Mindset podcast, episode number 176. If you've ever wondered why breaking a habit feels so hard, even when you know exactly what to do, this episode is for you. This is the Strong is a Mindset podcast, where you'll learn how to build both a strong body and a strong mind by eating, moving, and thinking. I'm your host, physician, personal trainer, certified health coach, and certified life coach, Carrie Holland. Hey, how are you? What's new? What's good? So, what's good here? Well, after putting out 175 podcast episodes, I went back and took a look at some of the concepts that I've covered. And that brought me back to one of my most downloaded episodes of all time. And that's episode number 84, How to Break a Bad Habit. And honestly, it's kind of nuts to think about how much time has passed since I recorded that episode. So when I went back and re-listened to it, I realized how much for me and what I know about habits has changed. Not because it was wrong, but because my understanding of habits, habit change, and helping people through habit change has evolved quite a bit, and I approach it differently now. And that episode is packed with good information, but I'd make it simpler today. What I heard when I re-listened to that episode were loads of strategies I knew about habit change. Things like determining the trigger of your habit, what your routine is, finding the reward you get from the habit, how to replace it. And while all of that is solid science and that information still holds up, what I've learned since then is that simpler is better, because most people don't need more detail. Instead, most people need a clear, straightforward path to move them forward. And here's the truth I didn't fully understand at the time, but I get it now. Breaking a bad habit isn't just about the strategy. Breaking a bad habit is also about the way you think. So, any lasting change you want to make needs both a solid plan and the mindset to stick with it. So, if I could summarize what I have learned about habits from my own learning, mixed with now hundreds of coaching calls since that episode, it would be this. Habit change is two things. It's strategy plus thinking. And I'm calling this out specifically because most people get laser focused on the strategy, the plan, the system, the macros, the spreadsheet, but they don't give enough credit to the thinking piece of this work. They forget that they're human. They forget that change is messy. They forget that even with the best plan in the world, your brain is still going to freak out on you. You're still going to have cravings. You're still going to have days when you're tired or unmotivated or where everything just feels hard. And that's when most people quit, not because the plan stopped working, but because they stopped working. They assume something's wrong with them, when really it's just that strategy alone cannot carry the entire load. You need both your thinking and your mindset on board in order for habit change to work. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're talking about the part of habit change that goes beyond just follow the plan. We're going to talk about how to simplify habit change, how to manage your brain when it inevitably wigs out on you, and how to finally change the habits you've been trying to change without it turning into a full-time job. All right, so let's go. Let's start with strategy, and that is all of the external stuff we do to try and fix ourselves and our habits. So things like moving the candy out of sight, tracking your calories and macros to the decimal, downloading a new habit tracker, or setting your alarm for 5 a.m. And none of this is bad at all. Strategy matters. Strategy feels productive. It's measurable. It's safe. And I love a good plan as much as anyone. Ask any of my clients and they will most certainly vouch for me on that. But with that said, what I have learned over and over is that most people don't have a strategy problem. Instead, they have a thinking problem. Because the things that look like strategy problems, like the missed workouts, the constant plan hopping, the macro recalculations, those are all really just symptoms of the same, much deeper issue, how you think when it gets hard. And there are common strategy traps that people get stuck in. I've seen them often. So let's talk through these because they are most definitely sneaky. So the first trap is constantly tweaking your plan instead of following it. So you might know this one. You've got a Google sheet, a planner, a color-coded system. And maybe you've spent loads of time recalculating your macros or designing a meal prep plan, but somehow when push comes to shove, you don't actually do it for any appreciable amount of time. And that's because planning feels safe and executing feels risky. If you stay in planning mode, you can't fail because you haven't really tried anything. Instead, you're endlessly working on it, telling yourself you're being productive when really you're avoiding the part that feels uncertain and has the risk of failure. So on paper, this looks like a strategy issue, like the plan isn't quite right yet. But what's really going on underneath it is doubt. What I find is that often you don't trust yourself to stick with your plan long enough to see if it works, so you keep changing it. And at some point, all that tweaking becomes procrastination. But because it feels productive, you justify it. And meanwhile, instead of trying a good enough plan and working on getting consistent with that, you end up editing your plan with the idea that it has to be perfect, it has to be easier, it has to feel better, and nothing changes. It's a vicious trap. All right, another strategy trap I run into is changing the plan the minute things get uncomfortable. This might look like making some decisions, deciding on an approach to changing your habit, but then aborting the process when it gets hard. So maybe you start a new nutrition plan and you crush it for 2 weeks while your motivation is high and the novelty is there. But then a few weeks go by and it's not so new and shiny anymore, and the initial novelty of your salad has long worn off, and you feel the pull of wanting chips and cookies and the junk food you used to eat, and then it feels uncomfortable. And instead of working through that discomfort, you assume the plan is the problem and you decide you need to change it. But this really isn't a strategy issue either. It's your brain doing what it does best, avoiding discomfort. So that is not self-sabotage, and that's not a weakness, that's your biology. When something feels uncomfortable, when you're hungry, tired, or stressed, or even if you're just craving a mid-afternoon dopamine hit, your brain sends a signal that says, make this stop. And because your brain is efficient, it will hand you the easiest solution it knows. That's the cookie, the couch, the M&Ms, the scroll, whatever it is. It's not that you can't stick to a plan. It's that your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do, steer you back to comfort. And here's the thing. Your brain doesn't know the difference between the discomfort of hunger and the discomfort of growth. It just registers, this feels hard and this needs to end. And then you start problem solving. You tell yourself you need a new plan, a different system, a tweak to make this more doable. But really what you're trying to do is get out of the feeling. You think you're fixing the plan, but what you're really doing is escaping the work, which is ironic because the work is in the discomfort. So that moment where it feels hard is the exact time your brain is rewiring. It's the point where old habits start dissolving and get replaced with new ones. But most people never get that far because they keep walking away the second it starts to feel uncomfortable. So when you hit that point, the point when your brain starts screaming, this is too much, this isn't working, I can't do this, let's go back to what we always do, find the cookies already. That is not failure. That's the sign you're doing it right. And that's the part that creates change. But it's uncomfortable. All right. And here's another strategy trap I see people get stuck in. And that is obsessing over the perfect macro split, the perfect workout, the perfect schedule. This is where, if it isn't flawless, you call it a failure and start over, rinse and repeat. You will hit your protein within 2 grams, track every bite down to the last calorie, and rearrange your day to fit your workout in. But if you miss a day or go off plan, it's over and you throw the whole thing away. And again, this is sneaky because it looks like discipline. You're being thorough. You're being detail-oriented. You are aiming for a job well done. But what looks like discipline is actually masking perfectionism or the fear of getting it wrong. And this is where you over-control every detail because it feels safer than allowing imperfection. But here's the truth. Getting it exactly right, that is not the goal. That's not possible. Instead, the goal is getting back up when inevitably you mess up. That is the strategy trap. On the surface, being obsessed with perfect looks like precision and effort, but underneath, it's fear. Fear of failure. Fear of letting go of control. Fear of doing just enough and worrying that it won't actually be enough. And here is what I will tell my clients when they run into this. You don't need a perfect macro split. It really does not matter if you eat 120 grams of carbs or 130 grams of carbs, because the count will likely be wrong anyway. So instead, you need a realistic plan that is good enough that you can actually live with. Because the plan you can live with, the one you can do on your busiest, messiest, most stressful day, that is the plan that changes you. That's the one you hang on to, not the perfect plan that you can never execute. All right. And then the last strategy trap I see people fall into is the belief that if you find the perfect system, you'll finally feel motivated and not lose steam. So this one is also sneaky because it sounds so reasonable. You tell yourself that once you find the right plan, the diet that fits perfectly, the meal prep system that fits seamlessly into your schedule, and the workout split that matches your goals, then everything will finally click. You'll wake up motivated. You'll stop overeating sugar. You'll stop craving chips. You'll stop falling off track. But that is an illusion. That is trying to find a plan that removes your humanity. And there is no such thing, because cravings, fatigue, and stress, those are not signs that your plan is broken. They're signs you're a human being with a normal life. The problem is that when these things show up, most people assume something's gone wrong. Sometimes they think, if this were the right plan, this wouldn't be so hard, until they start hunting for a better one. And that's the trap. You keep swapping plans instead of learning how to stay with the one that you have when it gets uncomfortable. And every time you switch, you reinforce the belief that there is a plan out there that will make discipline feel easy, that the right structure will magically turn you into the kind of person who never struggles. But that plan doesn't exist. There is no such thing. Remember, motivation doesn't come before the doing. It comes from the doing. It's the byproduct of sticking with something long enough to see results. Really, it's the byproduct of taking action. So when you tell yourself, I just need to find what works for me, sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's just your brain negotiating with you to stay comfortable. So the real work here is not finding the perfect system that keeps you motivated for eternity, because that is a unicorn fantasy. So instead, it's learning how to keep showing up when the novelty of your system has worn off, or when it's boring, or when it's inconvenient. All right. We've talked about some of the common strategy traps that clients run into, and I hope you're picking up on a recurring theme here. The truth behind all of these strategy problems is that they're not really about your plan at all. They're about your thinking. Strategy feels easier because it keeps you busy. It makes you feel like you're doing something when you change your workout or recalculate your macros or buy a new meal planning system. It gives you the illusion of control. But getting stuck in all of the strategy keeps you distracted from the real work, the emotional work, the mindset work, the feeling uncomfortable work. That is the work that's really going to move you forward. And it makes sense that we tend towards strategy over thinking. It's easier to white knuckle your way through a salad than it is to ask why you're eating when you're not hungry. It is easier to run harder and add another mile to your workout than it is to sit with your body image. Those are action-based. And sometimes, for a little while anyway, those actions are easier to do than it is to think. And that's why getting stuck in strategy is so tricky, because it doesn't feel like avoidance. It feels like effort. You're working hard. You're in the game. You're adding miles. You're eating salads. You're recalculating your TDEE for the 100th time, but you're not actually moving. And if you've ever wondered why it feels like you're doing everything right, but not getting anywhere, this is it. So I had a client that did exactly this. Every time we met, she had some version of this time, this program, this plan. This is it. And she stacked plan on top of plan, new macros, new gadgets, new trackers, new workout split. There was always something new she was adding to the mix. But underneath all of it was the same thought that inevitably surfaced whenever it didn't work. And that thought was, I always fall off. And as you can guess, that's exactly what she did. She fell off repeatedly until she finally realized and understood that she was trying to build a new life on the same old mindset. She thought that buying an Oura ring and Pyrex meal prep containers and then a Peloton would make things change for her. But they didn't. That approach doesn't work, because buying an exercise bike does not make you suddenly exercise when your underlying belief about yourself is, I don't follow through. You can't keep telling yourself the same story, I always fall off, or I never stick with it, and expect a new plan or a gadget or glassware to fix that. You will always end up right back where you started. And that is where so many people get stuck. They keep layering new programs and new strategies and new products on top of the same belief system and then wonder why nothing sticks. So for my client, before we changed a single thing about her plan, we had to look at what she believed about herself. And that right there, that was the real work, shifting from I always quit to I keep trying. And once we started working on that, like really working on it, once she stopped rearranging her plan and buying new gadgets and started addressing what was underneath it, that is when things slowly changed. And over time, she saw for herself that she didn't need a different strategy or a new gadget. Instead, she needed a new way to think about herself. And that is the real point. You are not a machine. You are a human being with emotions, stress, urges, and stories. And those things don't disappear just because you made a plan. You can't outsource that. You can't outplan and outstrategize your own brain. Meaning, you cannot delegate the part where you feel things. But that's what so many people try to do. They want a plan that makes them stop feeling frustrated or tempted or stressed or tired. But that is not what change looks like. Real change means learning how to feel all of that and still move forward anyway. Because here is the real, hard, honest truth. Without the thinking, without the willingness to experience discomfort, no amount of strategy will save you. You can have the most beautiful plan in the world, color-coded, macro-counted, perfectly periodized, and it still won't work if your brain is not on board. Because plans don't execute themselves. You do. And that means you have to be willing to do the part the plan can't do for you, the messy, uncomfortable part. That is the work. That's the part you can't automate or outsource or shortcut. So yes, the plan most definitely gets you started. But your mindset, your self-trust, and your willingness to do the hard thing when it's uncomfortable, that is what keeps you going. And so here is what I know now. While I've just shared that you don't need a more perfect plan, you also don't need more willpower. Instead, you need more willingness. That is the piece I missed years ago. And it's partly because I couldn't see it in myself. So in my own life, looking back, I can see all the ways I was unwilling to feel discomfort by not speaking up, by not saying what I really thought, by not holding boundaries, by not trying something different, whether that was in my workouts, my meals, or in my career. Everywhere I turned, I could see how I was unwilling to feel discomfort. And now I get it. Everyone wants the perfect plan, but very few people are willing to feel the discomfort that comes with following it. But in order for change to happen, you have to be willing to feel hard stuff, willing to feel uncomfortable. And that's where most of us shrink back and say, no, thank you, maybe some other time. And then we try to convince ourselves that if we just force ourselves to work harder, cut out more carbs, or sweat for 45 minutes instead of 30, things will get easier and change will happen. But that's not it. If you've been telling yourself you just need more motivation or more discipline, no, that is missing the point. What you actually need is willingness, the willingness to feel uncomfortable and do the work anyway. That is where the growth lives. So really think about this. Every change you've ever made came from doing something that did not feel great at first, whether that was switching from staying up until midnight to going to bed at 9 o'clock so you could get up at 5 o'clock and work out, or transitioning your diet from mostly processed stuff to whole foods, or changing your career path. Whatever that change was, it started by doing something that felt uncomfortable. And the more of that discomfort you're willing to feel, the more success you'll have. And every single habit has that uncomfortable moment, the pull of the cookie, the couch, the snooze button, the drive-through. And in that moment, when you feel that pull and try to do something different, your brain freaks out. It tells you, this is too hard. This won't work. We can start again on Monday. And please hear me, that is not failure. That is the game. This is the exact moment you've been training for. This is the exact moment I want you to be prepared for. Meaning, instead of waiting for your brain to freak out and then being shocked, I tell my clients to expect it. Expect internal resistance from your brain rejecting a different approach, and have a mental plan ready to go just as much as a physical one. So it's not enough to say, when I crave sugar, I will drink water. No, that's a physical plan. And yes, it's a reasonable one in theory. But if that's all you've thought through, you're doing yourself a disservice because your brain is going to be left hanging. You also have to know what you'll say to yourself when your brain starts shouting, this is stupid, I want cookies. You have to be ready for that resistance to come up because it's not a matter of if, it's when. And I'll just figure it out, or I just won't eat the cookies is not going to cut it. You have to be ready with what you're going to say to yourself in response. And the simpler, the better. You do not need a paragraph of positive affirmations. You don't need a diatribe. You do not even need to be grammatically correct here, okay? You just need something short and believable you can grab onto in the heat of the moment. Something like, this is hard and I'm doing it anyway. Or you can even borrow my phrase. I use it all the time and it's come in handy. It's calm, control, release. That's it. It's not a sentence. It's not a directive. It's just 3 words that bring me back to earth when things get hard. And that is thinking. That's the work. And then this is where willingness comes in. Because sure, you can say the sentence, you can say the mantra, but it's not going to amount to anything unless you are willing to feel the discomfort that comes from not doing the thing you always do. You have to be willing to feel the discomfort and walk straight into it like you own the place. You've got to see the thing that you're afraid of, the craving, the urge, the awkwardness, the desire, the silence. You've got to see that it's not dangerous. It's just different. We've been conditioned to believe that if it doesn't feel good, something's wrong. But that's not true. It just means you're changing. Discomfort does not equal danger. Discomfort just means your brain is doing what it's designed to do, keep you safe. So when you start changing your habits, when you walk past the vending machine or skip the cookies or get up early for a workout, your brain thinks something is wrong. It sends up an alarm saying, hey, this is uncomfortable. We shouldn't be doing this. But that's not danger. That's just your brain's wiring reacting to change. And this is the exact moment you have to work through, because this is where habit change actually happens. You have to let it be uncomfortable. There is no way around it. You can't skip this part. So you're not just changing your behavior, you're retraining your brain. You're teaching it that it's safe to do things differently, and the world doesn't come to an end and you don't spontaneously combust if you don't have the cookie. You're showing yourself that change is uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. And what you're doing in that process is building something sustainable instead of something reactive. So the next time your brain wigs out, the next time it tells you, hey, this is too hard or this won't work, hold on. Don't react immediately. Instead, remind yourself, this is that moment she was talking about. This is the part where I train my brain. Then use your words. Say your phrase. You can say it out loud. You can say it to yourself. It doesn't matter. And then, most importantly, stay. Stay with yourself, with the urge. Stay with the craving. Stay with the discomfort long enough for it to rise and fall on its own, because it will. Let yourself see that you can handle this. This is the part that rewires your brain. That's the part that shows you, I can do what I said I was going to do. And that's the part that makes your habits last. All right. Now that we've talked about strategy and we've talked about thinking, let's bring these two components together. Because when we're talking about changing your habits, again, it's really not one or the other. You need both. Strategy gives you structure, but thinking gives you staying power. Meaning, a good plan tells you what to do, but a good mindset helps you actually do it, even when you don't feel like it. And this is where so many people get confused. They think the key is just to keep fine-tuning their strategy until it feels easy. But if you've been at this long enough, you know that easy isn't the goal. Effective is. And then you need the willingness to stay with it when it stops being exciting, when it stops being convenient, and when it's not perfect. That's the part that makes it stick. That's the part that turns it into your lifestyle. And here's another truth. Sometimes tweaks to your plan are necessary, and sometimes they're avoidance in disguise. So how do you know which is which? Okay, so here's what I tell my clients. If you've truly stuck with a plan consistently, you've shown up, you followed through for a meaningful duration of time, and it's still not producing results, or it feels physically off, then you need a tweak. That is data. That's information worth adjusting. But if you haven't given it time yet, if you keep changing things the moment they start to feel uncomfortable or boring or inconvenient, that is not strategy. That's avoidance. And that's your brain chasing something new in order to get relief. And this is where it gets tricky, because sometimes that avoidance looks responsible. You tell yourself you're just trying to be more consistent, so you've got to change your plan. But if the tweak you're making lets you escape the part that's hard, then it's not about consistency. It's about comfort. So before you change anything, pause and ask yourself this question. Am I adjusting the plan because it's truly not working or because it's uncomfortable? If you're honest, you'll usually know the answer. Because here's the thing, a great plan on paper means nothing if you don't have the mindset to carry it out. And an amazing mindset with no structure eventually flounders. You really do need both. And I've got a client who reflected this so well. When we started working together, her goals were super simple. Eat better, lift weights regularly, and stop obsessing about perfection. So we built her a good enough plan. 3 strength sessions a week, balanced meals that she actually liked, and permission to mess up without throwing the whole thing away. And she did not hit every target perfectly. She was not 100% compliant. Sometimes she ate her weight in dessert over the weekend. Sometimes she had more glasses of wine than she intended. But she was consistent enough, and she kept going. She learned to think differently about the days that didn't go well. She didn't make them mean anything about her as a person, whereas before, anytime she messed up, she made it mean she was a failure. She proved to herself she didn't need a better plan. She needed a steadier mindset. And we worked on that hardcore until she had the mindset tools firmly planted in her pocket to access and feel confident using them. And when you start thinking that way, as my client did, when you start combining strategy with the right mindset, you'll stop searching for the next program and start owning the one you already have. You'll stop needing to be perfect and start focusing on being consistent. You don't need a fancier plan. You need a simpler plan that you can actually live with, one that fits your real life and not your ideal one. And you need a mindset that keeps you willing to show up when your work is not perfect, not easy, or not exciting anymore. That right there is the core of habit change. So where does this all leave us? You've got strategy, you've got thinking, you've seen how they work together. Now let's put it all into something simple. So you can think of these as your new rules for habit change. These are things I've learned, not just from coaching hundreds of people, but from doing the work myself too. First, simplify. A good enough plan done consistently beats a perfect plan that you abandon every single time. You don't need the perfect macro split or the best workout or the most detailed meal prep system. Instead, you need a plan that fits your real life that you can repeat on your busiest days, not just your best days. And please remember, simple does not mean lazy. Simple means sustainable, and it's what helps you show up day after day. And then second, expect discomfort. Don't wait for it, plan for it. Remember that change is uncomfortable and it's supposed to be. That doesn't mean anything has gone wrong. It's your brain learning. And when you encounter that moment of discomfort, when you do something different, don't be surprised when your brain says, this is too hard. Expect it, plan for it, and know exactly what you'll say to yourself when it happens. And again, the simpler your response here, the better. Because when you expect discomfort, you don't have to fight it. You can walk through it with your eyes wide open, prepared for your brain to freak out, but with a response ready to go. And then third, practice willingness. Remember, this is not about willpower. It's about willingness to feel awkward, willingness to not get it right the first time, willingness to be uncomfortable on purpose because you know that's how growth happens. You cannot wait to feel ready before you act. You act, and the readiness comes after. That is willingness. And fourth, have self-compassion. So I know I've talked about willingness, but here's the thing. If all you have is willingness, without kindness to go with it, you'll burn out. And I'll be honest here. I used to roll my eyes at this idea. I thought self-compassion meant letting yourself off the hook or lowering your standards, but that's not it at all. Self-compassion is what allows you to keep going when things don't go as planned. It's what helps you stay in the game when your brain is telling you you blew it. Self-compassion is what keeps you learning instead of quitting, okay? And it's got three main parts: self-kindness instead of self-judgment, a balanced perspective where you neither over or under identify with your mistakes, and recognition that mistakes are part of our common shared humanity. And that means as long as you're human, you're going to mess up. Self-compassion really isn't fluffy, it's essential because you cannot blame or shame or judge yourself into growth. Self-kindness works way better. And then last, you build self-trust by putting in your reps. Every time you follow through, even when you don't feel like it, you are not only building a new habit, but you're changing your identity. Every workout, every walk, every early alarm, every no thank you to the cookie, those are all reps that build evidence for the person you're becoming by your habits. And those actions may seem small, but that's how habits and really your self-trust are built. Habits are not built in giant leaps, okay? They're built by the tiny, ordinary moments where you follow through and keep your word to yourself. And the more reps you put in, the more you start to believe you're someone who can change her habits. And that belief really is everything, okay? So here's my challenge to you. Stop obsessing over finding the perfect plan. Stop chasing the next system, macro split, tracker, or tweak. Instead, see what happens when you stop fighting the discomfort of changing your habits and start walking toward it. That's where your work is. If breaking a habit has been hard for you, please remember that you are not alone. You are not broken. You are human, and your human brain is wired to take the easy route. That's its job. And your job is to notice that and practice choosing the uncomfortable thing anyway. Because every time you do, you get one step closer to changing your habits and one step closer to building a lifestyle that moves you forward. And most importantly, you prove yourself to yourself that you can feel something uncomfortable and walk through it. That is how the real change happens. And if you want help with this, let's go. When you coach with me, we'll build both the strategy and the mindset to go with it so you walk away with habits that become your lifestyle. Check out my website, send me a message at www.carriehollandmd.com/contact, and let's talk about how coaching will change your habits and change your life. All right? Thank you again for hanging out with me, and I'll catch you again next week. Hey, if you want to build muscle but don't know where to start, I've got you covered. Head over to carriehollandmd.com/buildstrength and download my free guide to help you maximize your strength training. Inside, you'll find the essential exercises for building muscle, plus simple 1, 2, and 3-day workout plans that you can follow with just dumbbells and a bench. You'll also find strength training tips to help you train smarter and see real results. My goal is to help you get strong, and this strength training guide will help you do it. Go to carriehollandmd.com/buildstrength and check it out. Thank you for listening to the Strong is a Mindset podcast. If you want to learn more about how to build both a strong mind and a strong body by eating, moving, and most importantly, thinking, check out carriehollandmd.com.